Okay, we have the recorder going. For those of you who are participating live, welcome to the live presentation, that is. I'm recording this for the archives, and then there will be the archival viewers, so you are the live viewers. Just want to call your attention to the screen. As we're looking around at the screen, you'll see in the upper right-hand corner the names of what are deemed the panelists. Myself, Peter Smallage, the New York State Extension Forester and host, for Mark Whitmore, who's going to be our presenter. And in the lower right-hand corner is the chat pod, where you can type in questions. Mark will be, if there's a really pressing question, Mark will field that during the presentation, but he'll probably defer most of the questions, general questions, to the end. Go ahead and type them in, and then that way they're available for subsequent responses.
Yeah,
if you'd like,
I might not notice them, so Pete, you could watch. That'd be appreciated.
I certainly will. The other thing I'll call your attention to, which is kind of a neat feature, if you go to the upper left-hand corner of the screen, you see a File menu. And then if you go down to File, you should have the option to save, either save or save as, and you can save the document. The document that you're saving is Mark's presentation, and you can save it either as a PDF file, or the default type is a UCF, which is Universal Communications Format. And by doing that, you'll have that available if you want to see the images or the text that Mark's going to be sharing with us, and you'll have that available. So that saves you that. Saves Mark and I the responding to several requests. I've saved it, and if it's a small enough size, I will post that to a blog at the Cornell Forest Connect.ning site. And that's when you close out of this webinar, you will be automatically dropped into that Ning site. So with that, we're a little after 12. I want to welcome colleague and friend Mark Whitmore in the Department of Natural Resources at Cornell University. Mark is forest entomologist extraordinaire, and he has been living the life of the emerald ash borer now for several years in New York, and has agreed. He gives about an annual update, and so it was time for another update, and I just saw news that there's a new sighting in a new state with a sighting rather. So that this beast is out and about, and it's our benefit to be able to listen to what Mark has to tell us. So with that, Mark, thank you, and the floor is yours. I'll just hover in the background.
Well, thanks, Pete. Have fun hovering there. Well, hello, everybody. It's sort of strange not having faces to look at, but there's a lot of familiar names up there, and I'm really happy that you've tuned in here. So with no further ado, I'm going to go to the big map, and indeed the big new infestation that's shown up today, just recently, is down here in North Carolina. Don't really know much about it myself, but it is just south of the Virginia border, and it's in 3 counties apparently. So, as are most of the infestations, when they do pop up, they've been there for a little bit of time, and that's what this one sounds like. So basically now we're up to 20 states. The most recent ones up here are New Hampshire, welcome New Hampshire, and of course Massachusetts and Connecticut. And I think the thing that really people need to think about the emerald ash borer is that, this map, it looks like it's covering a huge area, and it really it's just beginning in the United States and North America in general. It hasn't really covered very much of the total area encountered, or I should say occupied by ash forests in North America. Indeed, probably a small percentage, maybe even less than 10%. It's hard to really tell right now. But if you look at the map here, the dots aren't where it is exactly. It's just where they were first encountered in the counties. And to think about it, even further, it's been in Ohio for many years, and do you think that, Ohio, in the center of it, it just really hasn't spread. This is the 2012 infestation data. So, really in the area that it is in the previous map, it's actually occupying not all of the state, but just a portion of the states, and indeed New York is not different. But when you look at the distribution of ash in the United States, according to the Forest Service FIA plot data, you can see here that most of the area where it has been is really not heavy to ash. But when you look in the twin tiers here, New York, all throughout New York, New Hampshire, and Vermont seems to have been missed here. But we're really heavy into ash territory right now with the infestation, and so I think it's really important for people to understand sort of how the populations are behaving. If you go sort of historically back here in New York, here we were in 2009, those bucolic days when we just had one infestation, and here it was in Cattaraugus County in Randolph. One of the things I'm running across, and I think it's important for people whenever you're speaking with the press or anyone else, I get the impression that in some of the articles I see is that the infestation spread from the first detection in Cattaraugus County here. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth, because when you look at the next picture here of 2010, here we found this huge infestation in Ulster County, just 2 bugs in the trap, and it was close to 60 square miles or more when we started looking around, as well as up here in Monroe County. I've been here for a while. And then we get these little things like here in Bath and Pembroke here. I'll refer to it in the future. It's like it's been there since we caught a bug in 2010 in a trap, and we have yet to find any infested trees in that area, which is puzzling at best. So here we are, 2013. This is the current infestation map in New York State. The quarantine area here, the quarantine line has been shifted. So now basically everything below the thruway is within the quarantine. There are a lot of uninfested counties in here, a lot of territory that is uninfested. You can now truck logs all across the state without any problem, but remember, firewood is still only 50 miles from the point source of origin unless it's been treated. So the infestations, I'm going to go through right now, but I think it's really important to understand. I'm going to first go over population behavior as I see it in the emerald ash borer. And this death curve, I think, is something that should be emblazoned in anybody's mind who is really dealing with the emerald ash borer. It's important to see here at the very beginning stages, very, very little mortality, if any at all. This is Dan Hearn's work. He worked on this in southern Michigan and developed this curve. It's a very typical sigmoidal growth curve. The important part, though, is the fact that by the time you get like a little bit of mortality, say, when do people normally begin seeing stuff? Maybe around 15, 20% mortality. That's when people begin scratching their head. Well, you get to that point, and just 4 years later, you're up to over 90% mortality. That's a pretty rapid encroachment on mortality, and that's the problem, I think, that people in general, and especially communities that have to deal with dead trees, which are a public health hazard. I mean, you have such little time before you really notice it's there, and then all of a sudden you got a huge problem. And so I think early detection is the key. But the way to think about populations, I think, there are 2 basic factors: pest pressure and host tree density, and these affect population behavior. Pest pressure is very simple. It's just the number of bugs in one place at one point in time. It determines how quickly a tree will be killed. It's easy to imagine. You have lots of emerald ash borer present at one place in one time, and they'll kill trees really quickly. 2 years, 3 years. I wouldn't be surprised if they killed them in 1 year as well. But where you have very few emerald ash borer or low pest pressure, death can be very slow. Indeed, we've dissected trees that were infested for 7 years, and they still had green canopy, no canopy symptoms, no other signs or symptoms except for a little bark crack that we saw. And the landowner let us cut down the tree, and we did find it, and we cut through it, and we aged 7 years of xylem growth after that. So pest pressure is really important when you're thinking about what kind of symptoms will be present, and also your management. But pest pressure also determines the rate of spread in infestation. Lots of emerald ash borer present or high pest pressure, you're going to have a faster spread, but I'll qualify that in the next slide. If you have very few emerald ash borer present or low pest pressure, and it will be slow spread because there's tons of food right there in front of them. Why do they need to go any further? But then if you look at host tree density, it determines the rate of population buildup, and it also determines the rate of spread in infestation. High ash density, there's lots of food in one place. Populations can build rapidly, but if you have a low pest pressure, there's a lot of food right there. They're not going to be spreading all that quickly until the populations grow. Low ash density, the emerald ash borer has been shown to be a really good flyer, and if you have low ash density, it forces adults to search farther to find suitable host trees. And I'll illustrate that with one of our infestations soon. And so pest pressure also impacts management decisions. Detection is really, really important, as in the death curve. Remember, the earlier you detect it, the more time you have to deal with it. It's very, very difficult at low pest pressure to detect the emerald ash borer, but it's well worth the effort. And as I'll allude to later on in the presentation, different symptoms are present when you have different pest pressures. And at high pest pressure, there's a lot of symptoms that are easy to see, but boy, you're way behind the curve. Treatment options are also very important when you to consider with pest pressure. Timing of management decisions, the earlier the better. If you have a high pest pressure infestation nearby, you're going to want to be really seriously thinking about what's going on, as opposed to a very small infestation where you might have some time. I want to point this out. I'm going to point it out many times throughout the presentation. Use the EAB cost calculator from Purdue University. It's a fantastic tool, and if anybody's responsible for managing emerald ash borer, you really should take a look at it. It's very easy. I can even do it. And then pesticide effectiveness also varies with pest pressure. Only the best pesticides have been shown to work at high pest pressure. And oftentimes here in New York, there's people out there treating their trees already. When there's no bugs around, my dog can protect your tree. It's very easy. So these are the infestations we have around the state. I sort of drew them in blue. I wanted to point out the host density issues that we're dealing with here in Monroe County. Boy, that green really shows up well there, doesn't it? And in Erie County, there's a lot of ash in these areas. This is a percentage of the total basal area per county. So it doesn't mean that there's a lot numerically there. It's just the percentage of total trees. So there's a lot of farmland in these areas. But whenever you do get a forest, you get a lot of ash in them, as opposed to the Twin Tiers, 10%, 9% around these infestations, same here. But then when you get down here to Ulster County, it's only about 5%. Or 7% around Albany area. So there's different host densities that we're talking about in these infestations. And once again, to remind you about the death curve, these factors influence the way the death curve develops over time. So the way we're looking at the infestations in New York State, we've sort of designated 3 tiers depending on the size. Or Tier 1, you get most of the bugs are right there near the beginning of the infestation, and you get them building up. But also notice here this tail on all of these tiers. This tail is actually quite long, and my colleagues in the Midwest kept mentioning to me that they really do believe that there's a certain portion of the population that is just bent on dispersal. They're not going to stick around where all the food is. They're going to just go and find something else. And I've seen that myself. I really do believe that, it's like you see an infestation, you see dead and dying trees, but you know that thing is miles away from you as well, infesting other trees. And as in low pest pressure situations, you're going to be really hard put to find those trees. So the 3-tier system here, and in New York State, I want to stress that even though we have this huge quarantine area, roughly 95% of the forests are still uninfested. You know, we're still at the beginning stages, and so this is the time, I think, to really pay attention and get active. Once the whole thing's infested, it's going to be another story, but right now we have time to act. There are 9 active infestations. We only have 1 new one for 2013 so far. We're crossing our fingers and toes that it remains that way. 3 of the infestations are classified as Tier 3, large infestations. 4 of them are Tier 2, and 4 are Tier 1. Now, of those Tier 1 infestations, 2 of them are purple trap catches only. We've got bugs and traps, but we have yet to find any infested trees in those areas. So these are the infestations. I'm going to go through them shortly. So the Tier 3 infestations, of course, the big one here in the Mid-Hudson area, Ulster County area. Then we've got the Rochester infestation and the Erie County or Buffalo infestation. The Tier 2 infestations are Bethlehem and Albany County, Unadilla, Bath, and Randolph. And the Tier 1 infestations, Lewiston, Pembroke. Pembroke is one of those that we have a bug in a trap, but have yet to find any infested trees. But it's getting pretty close to this expanding population here. And then Nichols is the other one down here in Tioga County, where there's 1 bug in a trap, and we have yet to find any infested trees. So I'm going to sort of go through these infestations rapidly. I think it's important for people to think about what's going on. And I'm sorry about this blurry picture here. I've been trying to get a better copy of this map because it illustrates a really important point. This is the Ulster County infestation. This is the biggest we have. Remember I said we found bug trap, we got bugs in the trap. I think it was right here at a campground. We got 2 bugs in the trap. And then we started looking around, and sure enough, it was a very large area that there was infestation signs. But this was 2010. And I want you to pay attention especially to this area here. It's 10 miles away from our earliest detection. Now, these, I must say right now that we're using primarily woodpeckers as a way of defining the edge of the infestation. Woodpeckers we're finding, especially in the wild forest situation, not especially so in urban areas, but in forests, woodpeckers are really good at finding food. And boy, they love the emerald ash borer. And so this line here, this black line, which we consider the core of the infestation, is pretty much defined by the limit to where we have found woodpecker trees. But then if you go here to 2013, you'll notice that 10 miles away from 2010, or even further here, we're getting these woodpecker trees. So, you know, we're looking at upwards of 5 miles a year population expansion in this area. And remember, this is the area where we have some of the lowest density of ash in the state, I think around 5%. So I think that this is really playing out right now, that the emerald ash borer is moving quickly in this area of low ash density, but it is a clumped distribution as well. So it hangs out in these wet areas here around Woodstock and Ruby, but it's fleeing quickly out in this area. Okay, then we look at West Point, and West Point is a Tier 1 infestation. I mean, there's just a couple of trees we found infested in West Point. Again, it was detected in a purple trap, and we looked around, and we could hardly find any trees. Well, there aren't very many ash trees in this area, and so you know, we'll see what happens, but I'm not too worried about that area. The Bethlehem infestation is a Tier 2 infestation. It's centered around a railway here. The infestation, it's spread, you know, it's over a couple miles in diameter here, and it's moving into the urban areas and suburban Albany, but it's also moving into the hills here where there's lots of ash. So this one is going to be moving, and it will probably start moving pretty quickly here. The 5-mile radius and the 10-mile radius, you know, people ask me about, well, when should I treat my trees? And, you know, basically right now, the closer you are to the black, the more important it is for you to get on it right now if you want to save your trees. The further away you have time. And I think I wouldn't be treating my trees if I lived more than 5 miles away from this infestation. But I'll get into that further later on in my talk. Here's the recently detected Unadilla infestation here. It's centered around the village of Unadilla. It's up in the hills to the north. There's a lot of dead trees hanging over a man's house here in the south. This infestation is spread probably about, I think the distance is about 3 miles here. There's a lot of ash in this area here, and there's a lot of ash forests here. So I expect to see this one spreading rapidly. And as in the Bethlehem, if you want to protect your trees, you're in the 5-mile area, I'd say go for it now, because this thing has obviously fled further from the black. Next infestation, this is Nichols. This is tier 1. This is a place where we got one bug in a trap and started scratching our heads and still have yet to find any infested trees. The smoking gun, though, is right here at the Tioga Downs racetrack. I was actually looking around the area, and there is a parking area for all of the horse trailers, and it's right next to a heavily stocked ash wetland, about 5-acre wetland. And I asked the security guard there, he wouldn't let me in. I was from Cornell, obviously. But I asked him where the trailers are coming from, and he said, oh, no, yeah, New York, but a lot come from Ohio. There you go. You know, it's like the emerald ash borer is probably really good at hitchhiking, especially when you got lots to hang on to, like horses and straw and stuff. So here's the bath infestation. I'm sort of moving east to west in the state. The bath infestation is one that has sort of surprised me how quickly it's been moving, but I think that we probably didn't nail where it originally started at the very beginning. We originally thought that it might have started at a campground. Let me see, is that where it is? Campground, yeah, that's pretty much where it is. But indeed, I think after looking at it later with some of the DEC foresters, we came upon a hunting camp up here, and it looked like it had been there much longer than we thought. Since that time, this is all very rural forested area. It's moved into wetlands down here, and it's just really building in there. Hopefully we'll be releasing some parasitoids at that location shortly. And indeed, I think this map is a little bit old because it's right down here, right along the river, in a ash wetland area. It's very heavily stocked to ash. And then right up in this corner here, it's sort of like there's just one lonely infested tree. So, you know, it's very weak at the edges of the population, except down here where it's in the ash wetland. But it is moving, and it is moving rapidly. So it's been 3 years since we really found this area, and it's moved probably about the most maybe 10 miles from the point of origin. This is the big one here that I'm really anxious about, actually, if you could say I'm anxious about bugs. But the Rochester infestation basically started right about here. We think it actually started because there was a pile of wood at a house, and there was one big dead tree, and was just getting into about a 40-acre woodland. But since that time, this is right where the Genesee River crosses the thruway. And so if anybody is anxious to really see what death and destruction looks like with emerald ash borer in New York State, I recommend driving by on the thruway and paying attention when you get to the Genesee River. It's really remarkable, and next year it's going to be even worse. The interesting thing about this is, yes, it's very heavy. It's all the way up here into the RIT campus, where it's taken out. I mean, when you get forests in this area, they're usually wet. And when you got wet forests, you got tons of ash in them. And so all around the RIT campus, there's just tons of ash, and those trees are just dying really quickly right now. A lot of wetlands up in this area too. You can see that that was just there. They're really heavily infested, and they're going to be, the mortality is just going to be very, very dramatic shortly. But then you get into this area here, and there's hardly any indication that there's any emerald ash borer in that area. I think we drew this black line because we do have an infestation down here south of Caledonia, but it's still very light. The majority of the population is in this area, and it's all the way up here into Rochester because for some reason there's this park with only a dozen trees in it or so, and they were infested. And I have no idea why it's there, but it's right next to a railroad. So railroads seem to be a theme that's tying things together here. But oh, let me go back here. This is an area where a lot of people should be, if they want to be protecting their trees, they really need to be paying attention right now. And I think the 5-mile radius is from the black here is probably really a good idea. And if you're really careful, and I'll talk about it more later, that's a plan I have, you might want to begin treating if you're within this 10-mile area. So here's the Pembroke. This is another place where we got one bug in a trap and have yet to find any infested trees. I don't believe that we found that one rogue bug that was happens to be flying out of the buffalo infestation, but it could have been. We'll see. But this is the buffalo infestation. It was discovered up here by a tree service professional who was looking at some trees that a customer called him on, and the story is that emerald ash borer landed on his clipboard, and that's how it got discovered. So basically, most of the mortality right now is around the Lancaster area, just south of the airport. There is, once again, a railroad right here. Pat Marin, who's on this call, just recently found it right around here in the Harris Hill area. And so it is going. The interesting thing here is that it's in a very large wetland. I think it's about 700 acres or so. I can't recall exactly, but it's stocked to ash like 10,000%, and it's all wet and totally inoperable as far as logistically getting in there and doing anything. And so we're going to watch bugs getting chunked out of there in quantities. It's down here in the West Seneca area. It's just expanding in that area quite a bit. It's also in between here. There's trees here and there, but this is really, I think, the most urban infestation that we have at this point in time. It's also down here in South Park area, and I think, Pat, you found it down south of the South Park area here. So, it is spreading. It's like anywhere within this red area, I would recommend people treat your trees as fast as you can because it's obviously getting out there, and it's good to treat your trees ahead of the emerald ash borer rather than after it already gets into them. But I've seen some pretty remarkable examples of trees being saved after they're already infested. Here in the 10-mile area, you definitely need to be planning. There's no question about it. Here's the infestation up in Lewiston, right next to the bridge, and it's on a golf course. Pat says that he's seen it about a mile away from the center here of the infestation. Very light infestation right now. We're calling it a Tier 1. It will be expanding because the Niagara County, I think, has about 28% ash basal area. So there's a lot of ash in there when you start to get into the woods. And then here's the original infestation down in Randolph. We started working here immediately. We put a lot of resources into taking out trees and chipping them up. It's a very effective way to kill bugs and reduce the pest pressure because every female can lay 100 eggs, and so every bug you kill, you're really you're taking out a lot of future bugs. And so I really do believe that our efforts over a 2 to 3 year period of time here did slow down the spread, but it is moving. This map needs to be updated because I know it's down here and it's definitely moving this direction. I have a study going on there where I'm looking at the ash resources and trying to see if the quantity of ash in a stand and stand structure influences the direction of population movement and buildup. And so this will be interesting to see because here we have a nice big green and black ash swamp. And so here's something that people in the north should be aware of as well. This is Mallorytown, Ontario. The last time I was there, I think that was last year, I went by and I really couldn't see very many trees. The Canadian government got in there and they took out as many infested trees as they could find. Very small infestation, but as you know, as I know, they are definitely away from there. And as we've seen in the Hudson River, rivers are not a barrier to the emerald ash borer. And so people should be paying attention in this area to what's going on and looking for signs and symptoms in that area. And so I know everybody who's seen my presentations in the past has seen this, but I can't state it enough that the economic impacts of the emerald ash borer are going to be huge. This is a great study, and I think it points out the fact that that it's the homeowners and municipal governments that are really going to be bearing the weight of the economic impacts of this insect. We've got numbers right here, but I think one of the most important things here is we need to use the emerald ash borer to get people ready, because this is a really good study. These are some of my good friends, and this is very sobering. There's a 32% chance that another highly destructive borer species will invade the U.S. in the next 10 years. I think the emerald ash borer was a real wake-up call to forest entomologists in general, and we've been looking at this and thinking about it. Okay, the emerald ash borer caused the problems in the Asian longhorn beetle. What's next? And they're there. Let me tell you. That's a whole nother lecture. If you look at the cost, this is the emerald ash borer, the percentage of cost. Here you get local government expenditures over 50%. And this is over the whole United States. Household, residential, property value loss. The timber loss in New York State is far greater than elsewhere, because we have a lot more ash than other states. But still, in proportion to these others, I think it's really important to realize that the rubber hits the road in the local communities and in your home. And so to think about it, I just walked around my own home and took pictures of this 3-foot diameter green ash right next to these homes. It's going to cost a lot to remove that. You got power lines, trees leaning over homes. This poor guy has 5 ash trees leaning over his house. This is like 2 blocks away from me. And this is my neighbor across the street who's on a fixed income and has 4 huge green ash. They're beautiful trees right behind her home. And this one, boy, I wouldn't want to touch that with my chainsaw. But anyway, another thing to think about is the cost it's going to create in New York State to maintaining the power transmission lines. Everybody's used to power going out during the hurricanes, but I just wonder, with the amount of ash we have in New York State, what's going to happen. And I sat down with a friend of mine from National Grid, and we put together these numbers, and it's staggering that there's 105,000 miles of vulnerable transmission lines in the state, and with an estimate of 242 trees per mile, that makes for 26 million total trees, and a conservative estimate of 20% ash. And I really do think that's conservative, because ash tends to get into disturbed areas, and that's the definition of a power line corridor. It's disturbed. So that makes 5 million ash trees, and a conservative estimate of $300 a tree to deal with it. You come up with $1.5 billion it's going to cost the ratepayers to deal with this problem. I'm just going to touch briefly on detection. I know that many of the talks I've given, I like to focus on it because it's so important. But I think there are a few things that you really need to pay attention to here. That I get calls all the time that people have one ash tree. And I say, well, look around. Are there any other ash trees showing symptoms? And oftentimes, no will be the answer. And that is not the way emerald ash borer works. Once trees begin to show symptoms, there's a lot of trees in the area. So be sure you look at other trees around there. Use multiple symptoms in the diagnosis. Just don't look for the little D-shaped exit holes, which are really hard to see from a distance. Just don't use crown symptoms. Look for woodpeckering. Look for some of these others. And one of the big problems we deal with in New York State is that the ash in our area look like heck. And it must be EAB. And it's not, because ash decline is a very common disease here in New York State. Because we have so much white ash, New York and the Twin Tiers is like the center of density of white ash in North America. White ash do not like to grow on saturated soils. So which is the first field that you let go if you're a farmer? Well, it's the wet one, right? Well, that's the one emerald ash borer seeds into, and it starts growing, and happily for a while, and then all of a sudden it gets to a point where some kind of influence, biotic or abiotic, makes it uncomfortable, and it begins to go through a decline phase. So when you do see ash that does not look well, look for the signs and symptoms of emerald ash borer, and in particular, the most useful is woodpeckering on the tree. When that woodpecker damage, that will show you when you got yourself emerald ash borer as opposed to just ash decline. Remember how earlier I said that signs and symptoms vary with pest pressure. When you get the really early infestations, it's really difficult to detect. If you get bark splitting where emerald ash borer, there might be 1, 2, or 3 attacks on a single tree, and then the next year it will kill the bark above that attack, and the next year the tree grows, the xylem grows, and the bark, that dead bark, splits. You get woodpecker foraging too. It's amazing in the very early stages how quickly woodpeckers pick up on emerald ash borer. I imagine there is a learning curve that goes on, but it is remarkable at how quickly they do find them. Tier 2 infestations, woodpecker foraging is really, really apparent unless you're in an urban area. Woodpeckers, of course, aren't very common in the middle of Rochester right now. But canopy thinning begins to show up in a Tier 2 infestation. And really, by the time you've got canopy thinning, you've got a tree full of bugs. You got to get on it. And epicormic sprouting shows up. Then you get the Tier 3 infestations. Boy, you can see the canopy thinning from a mile away. Woodpeckers just go crazy. They strip the bark off the trees. It's remarkable to see that happen. And then epicormic sprouting shows up if they have the chance to form the epicormic sprouts, because oftentimes they'll die before they even have a chance to do that. So I'm going to get in and you spend the rest of the talk sort of talking about some of the latest management strategies that have been developed. But to do that, to preface it all, the natural control of insect populations, there's 2 basic principles to that. There's host tree resistance, and then there's biological control. Host tree resistance is not being shown in North American ashes, except perhaps in green ash. There's been some indication that there's a certain portion of the population, no, not green ash, blue ash, I apologize, it's blue ash that's showing some resistance. There is some resistance being demonstrated in people. Let me tell you, they're working on it now, especially the Forest Service lab in Ohio. They're working on crosses and back crosses, classic techniques such as have been used for American chestnut, but also trying to identify the genetic and chemical basis behind resistance displayed by the Asian species where the emerald ash borer comes from. And biological control. This is being worked on really, I think, very well right now. There's predators and parasites and pathogens, but what we're really working on now, and I'm going to hit on that, are the parasites or parasitoids, I should say. And to think about biological control, it's like it's an additive effect. You get woodpeckers, okay, and then you get a predator of some other sort. You might get a little bit of fungus, and then you get the parasitoids all acting together, and it's that additive effect that brings you control. So far, emerald ash borer is outrunning everything we've thrown at it, but really, it's like we need time, and given time, we will be able to hopefully address this problem. That's, it's like if you don't have hope, what do you have? And let me tell you, it's very depressing. I'm being a forest entomologist working on emerald ash borer. Another thing to realize that native tree pests actually provide an important ecosystem service by removing weak genotypes from the reproductive pool of individuals in a population. It's like, okay, so where emerald ash borer comes from in China, and it actually, it works like a native bug. Those trees are resistant. It takes out trees that are stressed, which is what happens with all our native bugs in North America. So the biological control, the classic biological control that's being developed right now is where you go out and you look for bugs in the area, parasitoids and predators in the area where the insect is native. And so people have been working on this from the get-go, and they've got 4 really good candidates right now. An egg parasitoid, Oobius agrilli, and then we got 3 larval parasitoids, Tetrasticus planiflanesi, Spatheus agrilli, and then a new one here, Spatheus gelini. And so the difference between these 2 Spatheus is that we think that this Spatheus might be a little bit sensitive to the cold, whereas this one comes from Russia, and it's much more cold tolerant. Oobius oviposits in the bark, on the eggs which are on top of the bark. The larval parasitoids oviposit through the bark and into the emerald ash borer. The right now, Ovius, Tetrasticus, and Spacius abrili have been released. They've been released at 2 locations, and we're looking to release actually more locations, and that actually I forget how many we've released at right now. Tetrasticus is the main one that we're releasing in New York State right now. But you also have to consider native biological control. Larval parasitoids of wood borers, there's a native Spacius floridanus, and then in Michigan they found an Tanacolis species, which has been actually quite numerous in some locations. So these natives are there, they're switching over to the emerald ash borer, and I think this is something that we need to be looking at as well. I've found Spacius floridanus in the Rochester area, as well as these predators. This Enochleris is a species, or is a genus of predators in the subcortical habitat, and then woodpeckers as well. So once again, adding it up, you might in some time in the future get control of the emerald ash borer. When that will be, we can't really say. So what are the management options that we're looking at? Do nothing. That really works well, especially when you've got liability issues that you're looking at. Remove all the ash before they become infested. Well, in an urban area, you're losing valuable canopy, and I'll hit on that again. But in a woodlot area, I mean, you might, in some parts of New York State, you might have 10 years or more before emerald ash borer even gets near you. And so if you harvest now, you've lost that big chunk of growth in your forest. Remove ash as they become infested. We're finding in the Midwest that this is a very expensive reactive management tool, because if you remember the death curve, it's like all of a sudden you have tons and tons of mortality, and it's really hard to deal with that. And I think about little Ithaca here and how many tree crews we have, and then I think about the number of ash that we have, and boy, I'd be willing to bet that we don't have enough manpower around here, or people power, sorry, to deal with all the dead ash if it were to be dealt with all at once. And then you can treat with insecticides, and I think people are right now in the Midwest are really realizing that retaining canopy is an important thing, and they're treating with insecticides to do that in many areas. And also we hope that with given more time, that we're going to have more options available, and it is becoming apparent. I'm going to focus on pesticides. I get lots of questions about pesticide use. There's 2 basic strategies for using pesticides. The first one here is using insecticides to spread out tree removals according to your schedule, not the bug. So basically what this does is it stretches out the death curve so that it isn't as steep, and it gives you more time to plan for your budget. And but I think the most important aspect of this is that you've got to start early in the infestation cycle in order to minimize the costs and retain maximum tree health. You know, it's also you need to develop your strategies. Which trees are you going to treat? Which ones are you going to take out? If you determine the trees to protect for keeps, you're going to have to pay attention to canopy, and it's a complex process. But it's important to go through, and you need time to do it. And that's why I'm stressing for communities to begin planning now rather than waiting. But you also have to plan to aggressively protect these trees for 12 years or more. We don't really know how long emerald ash borer is going to rest in this area. In the Midwest, it looks like in Michigan area, they hang around for 12 years. We'll see. I mean, we have a different situation here. We have a lot more concentration of ash, and who knows, they might just burn through it really fast with the populations get going. So one of the things I'm going to talk about, I brought this up. I wasn't going to touch on the life cycle, but I wanted to basically touch on 2 things. First of all, the emerald ash borer, when we talk about insecticides, you think about getting the insecticide into the phloem tissue so the emerald ash borer larvae eat the phloem and die. They would stop it as soon as it touched the phloem and started to feed right here. People haven't been really considering the fact that the adults feed on leaves. You can see right here where it's been feeding. The female will have to feed for a week, maybe more, 2 weeks, on leaf material to mature her ovaries before she can start laying eggs. This is another vulnerable point in the life cycle that is just being considered as a possible control venue. We actually dismissed it. I dismissed it earlier. I thought, oh, adults feeding, what the heck. But Deb McCullough and Rodrigo Mercader came up with this beautiful model, and it's a model, okay? It's not has not been tested experimentally, but it's something I think that people need to consider because the implications are huge. They call it urban slam or slow ash mortality, and basically this is the sort of the death curve right here. Just looking at it differently, if you don't treat your trees, this is what happens. You get the total death. You see it's rather rapid here, 4 or 5 years, and you got almost all the trees dead. If you treat 10% of your trees, you get this kind of death curve. I mean, you get some mortality, but not much. And this is treating 10% of your trees every year, a different 10% of your trees throughout the infestation. The really interesting thing is you consider if you treat 20% of your trees, you get hardly any mortality at all. Now this is a model. There are assumptions that are made. It's based. I mean, I've had discussions with Deb about this. It's based on a lot of good biology, and this is to get you thinking. So remember the adult feeding on leaves. Here you have at year 0, no treated trees. At year 1, you treat 20% of the trees. So an emerald ash borer coming into this forest might feed on this tree here without any problem, feed on that tree there, and then come to this tree, eat a leaf, and die. So that's the basis behind this. That there's a chance that the emerald ash borer is going to come into the forest and then eat on a leaf and die. And also, I got to say right now that this is based on the use of the insecticide called triage, or it's emamectin benzoate is the active ingredient. Because emamectin benzoate has been shown without doubt to protect your tree for 2 years, but actually Deb's data now is showing that you get 3 years of protection with this insecticide. So if you consider in year 2 you treat another 20% of your trees, the chances of the adult feeding on a treated tree are much higher. And then if you consider at year 3, you have a very high percentage of the trees here, 75% of them, are going to be poison to it. And so the chances of the adult feeding on one of these trees is actually pretty darn good. You get to year 4, and so some of these trees, they lose their potency, they come out, but you treated another. So you're maintaining a very high level of trees in there that are poison to the insect in year 5. The thing to think about are the costs associated with this. And so this is basically costs in thousands of dollars with no treatment here. This is, you get really rapid increase in costs. But when you treat the trees here, you get a 10% treatment and a 20% treatment and 30% treatment. You see the costs are just, they're spread out over a much larger chunk of time, but also they're not anywhere near as high as the do nothing technique, where the costs are all at once. Now here's the emerald ash borer cost calculator. I really like this. It's really important, and I can't encourage you enough to get into it. Basically, you can manipulate all different variables of your situation and come up with your different options to look at. Urban slam is one of those that you can consider. There's all these others. It's really fun to play around with this. But this is what Cliff Sadoff, the creator of the calculator, came up with. This is looking at urban slam. Here you see the costs annually, and this is the total cumulative costs of urban slam. This is the 20% urban slam, as opposed to proactive removal or replace them as they die. Look at all of a sudden those costs just occur very quickly in your community. But then you also have to consider the benefits of urban trees, and there are, of course, lots of different benefits. One of the most important is human health. And I've never seen, I'm happy to say, I have not seen a study as good as this one that just came out, and it's very powerful. Where they looked at data from the Midwest, and they found that the loss of trees to the emerald ash borer increased mortality related to cardiovascular and lower respiratory tract illness. it's a very powerful argument for maintaining urban tree canopy. And if you plug this into, if you look at Cliff Sadoff's model, here you can see the canopy, urban canopy just keeps growing over time, where if you let the emerald ash borer have its way, you've lost a lot of your canopy, over half your canopy very quickly. Another study by Richard Hauer, it's really interesting study, and he's looking at different treatments, complex model, but here it's the benefit-cost ratio. With treatment, you get $1.37, whereas with the remove and replant, you're losing so much. Out of every dollar, you lose 73 cents. So looking at the urban canopy, I know that a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people about this already, and so I'm proposing that people that are risk averse, they consider using the 33% solution, where if you consider the 3-year efficacy of triage, and you treat your trees year 1, you got 33%, year 2, you have 66, and then you have all of them treated within 3 years. And so you've got to be out ahead of the emerald ash borer. You see emerald ash borer coming, you've got to be sure you're out ahead. But you also spread those treatment costs over a longer period of time rather than all at one point in time. And so it's something to consider. I'm not really getting to get into too much of the systemic insecticide basics. I noticed that I'm running low on time. I want to leave some time for questions. But basically, spring application is best so the insecticide can get into the leaves and kill the adults. But timing is also important because the adults come out quickly, and so you really have to plan ahead to use this technique. 3 basic techniques: soil drench or injection. I worry the only homeowner product is a soil drench, and has been shown not to be effective at high pest pressure. It's an important thing to remember also because homeowners go out there and they just blithely treat their trees. I know I went down to the local agway and I asked the guy there I know, I said, are people out there, local people buying insecticides for emerald ash borer? And I think he said, you bet they are. And it's just like, that's crazy. It's not here. We don't need to use these products. It's expensive, plus I worry about pesticide loading in the environment because of surface water contamination. I like to fish. The bark spray, dinotefuran, is available in New York now. It's a rapid application and uptake technique. Really, the toughest trees I've seen, I've talked to arborists in the Midwest, and the toughest trees that they've treated, they immediately go in with the bark spray of dinotefuran because it's so fast getting into the canopy or into the phloem, and then they do a trunk injection with ivermectin benzoate. And those save trees that have had canopy decline more than 50%. I was really impressed with this one tree. But anyway, so the insecticides, imidacloprid, the 2 times products of Merit and Zytec are shown, Dan Hearns has done work and shown that they're very effective, as well as the ivermectin benzoate. The dinotefuran and imidacloprid products must be used annually, whereas the ivermectin benzoate, as in the model that I demonstrated, is effective for 3 years before you need to retreat. And it has been shown to be perhaps the most effective product under the highest pest pressure situations. Anybody who's curious, this publication is a couple of years old, but it still is a great publication. It's available for download from our website, NYIS.info. I recommend reading it if you're at all interested in insecticides for treating emerald ash borer. So what can you do now? As a small woodlot owner, I think it's really important to determine, first of all, what your long-term goals are. I see a lot of people, there's a lot of high grading going on around here. You can just see stands that have just been ripped apart. Obviously not by a professional forester, but by just somebody going in and saying, oh, you have ash, let me log it. Hire a forester. It is just so important I can't stress that enough. That way you're sure of getting what your goals are. You're sure of having them attained, I guess. And if you are harvesting, pay attention to the residual trees. It's like I've always said, for me, forestry is not particularly what you take out of the woods, it's what you leave in the woods. Because what is the goal? To regenerate your desired tree species for the future of the stand. And also, if your stand is heavily stocked to ash, I really consider, we get a lot of stands around here, old fields, whatever, that are, 75% or more ash. I really think it's important to, get out ahead of the emerald ash borer and take out the trees gradually so that you can get some regeneration going without having the invasive vegetation come in and decide that you're not going to regenerate that stand without a big fuss. Really important. Maybe take out a quarter of your stand now and take out another quarter of your stand in 5 years and another quarter and another 5 years. So gradually get that regeneration going. Collect seed for the future. The Forest Service has got a great program. You can go to our website and you can find references to it. But always, if you're considering management, know where EAB is in relationship to your location. As a homeowner or community member, you got to inventory your ash. If you don't know the trees on your property, you don't really know what your liabilities are. And you have to prioritize your management activities. When you got, like say, a community, when you have a park, so your park has 500 ash or more, like in Onondaga County, where there's 8,000 ash in one of the most heavily used parks in the county. You got to prioritize your management activities. Figure out, maybe remove the problem trees first, and then decide, okay, are you going to treat trees, and how are you going to do it? And where are the applicators? Are there enough applicators around? Are they going to be busy by the time emerald ash borer gets around? I mean, I can imagine some areas the applicators are working 24/7 on treating trees because of the demand. And I can't stress enough exploring the management options with the emerald ash borer cost calculator from Purdue University. Cliff Sadoff just made a brilliant product, and I think it needs to be used more. And then again, know where emerald ash borer is. Early detection is critical, and you're treating your trees. You want to treat your trees, know where it is. Pay attention to that 5 miles or that 10 miles. Know how intense the population is, and operate along those guidelines. And then participate in the local EAB task forces. It's been one of my favorite projects here, is to try and get communities working together to work on the emerald ash borer, and we've been successful in establishing a number of task forces around the state in areas where it's really important, like Monroe County and Western New York, and in the Ulster County area. These task forces have just done a lot of good things educationally and pooling resources. And then we got Onondaga County here. There's no infestation there, but they're being proactive. They're very active. I mean, it's impressive to see what they're doing. They're doing all sorts of projects, like inventorying the county properties, knowing exactly how many trees they have, where they are, what they're going to do with them. A lot of the task forces are out there. They're trying to get municipal officials engaged. I know the Western New York Task Force did a great job. They put together a survey and sent it around to all the different towns. I think that's a good tool for both educationally and so that they know what the needs are from the local communities. And then we have some fledgling task forces here. Albany, I'm going to be in Albany next week at one of the first meetings. Greene County is going, Dutchess County has got one going. So they're all over the place right now, and I think it's important that communities work together, that the experts in the communities pool their resources. Because for a long time, I would go out and I'd give a talk, and I could just see there were people that wanted to do something, and they weren't being used. I would say, oh, well, remember the signs and symptoms, and talk to your neighbors, and blah, 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 blah. It's all nice and fluffy stuff. But with a task force, there's a place they can go, and they know that their skills are going to be utilized efficiently. So if you're anywhere near these areas, look for your task force. Our website has all the task forces up and with contact information. And with that, I will finish and look at questions. Hello, Pete.
Hi, Mark. Great job.
Thanks.
So there were a couple of questions.
Okay, Okay, I see one at the bottom here. Is it possible to protect selected trees indefinitely by treating? Yes, as far as I can tell, our experience in the Midwest says you can protect the trees. Just you have to be sure and stay on the schedule. If you're using imidacloprid products or the dinotefuran, you have to do it annually. If you use the emamectin benzoate or triage product, every 3 years.
Okay, and then there was an earlier question from Richard. He says, can people in Ulster, Greene County area expect biocontrol to be useful locally, or will it be too late by the time the controls are present in significant numbers?
Okay, well, you opened a can of worms. You know, really, there's a physical barrier to these parasitoids that are being released right now, and because they have to oviposit through the bark. And you know how thick bark can be on ash trees. And so there's a large portion of the population of emerald ash borer that just are not physically available to these parasitoids. And indeed, the populations of emerald ash borer are growing so rapidly that, you know, to release even a couple thousand parasitoids in a population like in Ulster County, where there's just, I mean, I like to use the appropriate population delimiting figure of bazillions. Really, there's tons. I mean, there's so many out there that really there's no way the parasitoids are going to be able to catch up to the building populations there and elsewhere. However, for the long term, I mean, if we want ash back on our landscape in the next 50 years, 100 years, we have to have the biological control out there. Now's the time to get it going. Now's the time to make the steps. We never know what will happen in the future. You know, I could be totally wrong, and I would be very, very happy if that was the case. But in the long term, you know, maybe we get small ash trees with thin bark. They're going to be readily accessible to the parasitoids. We will have that additive effect of biological control, and it will work. No, we don't have Chalara in New York, as far as I know. EAB cost calculator. Yes, thank you.
So,
Pete.
Mark, I don't know what Chalara. Yeah, Mark, I don't know what Chalara is, but
that's in New York right now.
Somebody had mentioned. Oh, Martin did.
Yeah, that's a problem in.
So there's ash.
England.
There's a syndrome of ash that's been around since the 1920s. I've never heard it called Chalara, but it's locally called ash dieback or ash decline, which is caused by a mycoplasma, which will also kill trees. And so just on the surface, if you see sick and dying ash, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's EAB. It could be something else.
Yeah, Pete, Chalara is a disease that's present in England right now.
Right. So I'm not speaking about Chalara. I'm speaking parenthetically. Martin had referred to it as ash dieback, which is a name that's been used in New York for 100 years almost.
Okay.
All right.
Are small ash trees at risk? Yes, small ash trees are at risk. Basically, they aren't the first ones they go to, but I've seen ash trees, you know, an inch in diameter being killed. And you know, basically, the scenario is the ash borer takes out the big trees, the little trees come up underneath. We lose the seed production when the big trees come out. So the seed is released, they start to grow. As soon as they get to be sapling size, the emerald ash borer will be there to take them out. Okay, and so basically we get down to no ash trees pretty quickly, 10 years, 12 years period of time. You're very welcome. I'm happy to be able to talk to you all. As you all know, I like to talk about emerald ash borer. Are there any more questions?
Okay, so Aaron asked about ash decline. Ash decline is the phrase that was originally used, and that's been more recently attributed to ash yellows.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know if so folks can scroll back. So first of all, I think if you go back to that file menu, you have the option to save the chat pod. So if you save the chat pod, it'll save all these questions and all these websites, so you're able to go back and recover those websites. I've posted a couple. One is a link to the exit interview. Let me post that again. And then, so that's at the bottom. And then there is also a link that I posted to a fact sheet that Dr. Ralph Nyland from the SUNY College of Forestry, College of Environmental Science and Forestry did on silviculture and invasive insects. So that's where Mark had been mentioning, you know, some management, in general terms, some management for woodlots, and Ralph gives some of the principles that can be used to think about trying to transition from ash-dominated woodlots to less ash-dominated woodlots. Okay, and also Martin's asking about the continuing education link. If you scroll up, it's there. Let me see if I can grab it here. Hang on. And I'll post that. All right, so there's the link to the continuing education units. Please do, if you're interested in those continuing education credits, complete that survey link today because it date stamps, and then that makes it easier for me to provide the documentation for those credits. Oop, I sent that. Hang on just a second. Let me send that to everyone. There we go. And I got to send out the exit survey. All right, so there's the exit survey and the continuing education links. Okay, any other questions for Mark?
Oh, come on. I just wasn't controversial enough, I guess. Now I know. Tonight, controversy.
That's right. So this, I think, you know, Mark, some of the information you'd shared this with the Cornell Cooperative Extension educators about the new developments and the effectiveness of some of the insecticides is pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's rapidly evolving, and really, people. We have actually looking for a place to test this 20% solution. So if anybody has a woodlot that they're not going to be cutting or promise not to cut, I'd like to be able to get in there and maybe try different things on that. So raise your hand if you have a woodlot that you'd like to experiment on. Mark, can you speak about why the EAB quarantine was expanded? I am not a politician. I do not want to go there. I think that the quarantine should have been kept really small, but let me tell you, there are a lot of people. It's a labor-intensive thing to maintain small quarantines, and indeed we have a very important timber industry in the state. I just hope that the large quarantine does not spread the emerald ash borer needlessly to areas where people still need time to plan for what they're going to do.
Okay, well, seeing no other questions, Mark, I want to thank you, and I want to thank all of the participants. And we will have Mark back tonight at 7 o'clock if you want to see this presentation again. Or it'll be archived as well, so you can watch it over and over again. Okay, with that, thank you all very much. Have a great afternoon.
Bye, Pete.